throws a couple, so there'll be suspensions here.
In fairness, after the
At 40 years old, Kobe Bryant stood as a man whose battles on the hardwood had long been etched into the annals of basketball history. He was not merely a player, nor merely a champion. He was a warrior whose life had been defined by relentless clashes, rivalries that scarred and strengthened him, and enemies who, for a time, stood between him and immortality. But even among the countless faces that came and went through the corridors of the NBA, there were a select few who lingered in his mind long after the final whistle. Men he did not just respect, but despised in the heat of combat. Men who forced him to reach deeper, fight harder, and embrace a hatred that was not petty, but purposeful. For hatred, in Kobe Bryant's world, was fuel. And fuel was the only thing that could keep the fire alive. Today, at the age of 40, Kobe would name the 5 players he hated most. Not with bitterness, but with the clarity of hindsight. The story of those 5 names is a story of war, survival, and legacy. Number 1. Paul Pierce. To understand why Pierce drew the wrath of Kobe Bryant, one must step into the crucible of the 2008 NBA Finals. It was not just a battle of teams, it was the revival of a rivalry that spanned decades. The Los Angeles Lakers and the Boston Celtics, a clash that had defined generations. Kobe, now the undisputed leader of the Lakers, carried the burden of restoring the purple and gold to its throne. Yet standing in his path was Paul Pierce, a man whose very demeanor seemed to taunt Kobe's obsession with greatness. Pierce was not the most athletic, nor the most graceful, but he possessed a defiance that Kobe could never ignore. In Game 1, when Pierce was carried off the court with an apparent injury only to return minutes later, dropping shots with renewed energy, Kobe's hatred crystallized. For Pierce had taken the stage, stolen the moment, and ultimately seized the championship that Kobe craved. In interviews later, Kobe would admit he despised Boston more than any team in the league, and Pierce was the embodiment of that animosity. Even when Kobe triumphed 2 years later in 2010, vanquishing the Celtics in 7 games, his hatred never softened. For in Pierce, Kobe found a mirror of himself, arrogant, unyielding, unwilling to bow. That, above all, was intolerable. Number 2. Ray Allen. Known for the elegance of his jumper, Ray Allen's presence in Kobe's nightmares was not born of style but of substance. Allen's shot was a dagger that seemed to pierce through time itself, a weapon that Kobe could never fully disarm. In that same 2008 Finals, Allen's relentless accuracy from beyond the arc drained the life from the Lakers. Every swish was a reminder that perfection, when wielded by an enemy, was more devastating than brute force. Kobe had often prided himself on being the most meticulous, the most disciplined, the most prepared. Yet in Allen he found a rival whose discipline rivaled his own. The hatred was not personal, not rooted in off-court words or gestures, but in the silent torment of watching Allen's shots break momentum, silence crowds, and undo hours of preparation. Kobe would later confess in documentaries that facing Ray Allen meant there was no room for error. One lapse, one moment of hesitation, and Allen would make him pay. Hatred, in this case, was a recognition of suffering. And in Allen's jump shot, Kobe suffered often. Number 3. Reggie Miller. If Allen represented elegance, Miller embodied audacity. Reggie Miller was a showman, a provocateur, a man who thrived on taunting his opponents as much as defeating them. For a competitor as serious and proud as Kobe Bryant, this was intolerable. Their duels in the late 1990s and early 2000s became a theater of hostility. Miller would trash talk with reckless abandon, waving arms, needling Kobe, smiling in his face even as he tried to break him down. In one infamous confrontation, fists nearly flew between the two, requiring separation before chaos consumed the court. Kobe hated Reggie not simply because he was dangerous on the perimeter, but because Miller mocked the sanctity of the game. To Kobe, basketball was war. To Miller, it was war and theater. That distinction enraged him. In interviews years later, Kobe admitted that Reggie was one of the toughest players he had ever faced, a man who knew how to get under your skin and stay there. Hatred, in this case, was born not only of rivalry, but of disdain. Reggie represented the trickster, the agitator, and for Kobe, nothing could have been more offensive to his warrior's code. Number 4. Raja Bell. Unlike the legends of Pierce, Allen, or Miller, Raja Bell was not a superstar. He was not a future Hall of Famer. But he was a thorn, sharp and unrelenting, lodged in Kobe's side during the height of the Lakers-Suns rivalry. In the mid-2000s, when Phoenix emerged as a powerhouse with Steve Nash orchestrating their offense, Raja Bell became their weapon of choice against Kobe. He hounded him full court, tugged at his jersey, clawed at his arms, and made every possession a battlefield. Bell once infamously clotheslined Kobe during a playoff game, an act so brazen it elevated their feud into something personal. In interviews, Bell admitted he held no fear of Kobe, that he relished the challenge of trying to break him. Kobe, for his part, loathed Bell not simply for the physical torment, but for the audacity to believe he could hold his ground against him. The hatred here was not about legacy or rivalry, but about insult. In Bell, Kobe saw a soldier who dared to challenge a king. And though Kobe often got the better of the duel, the memory of those battles lingered like a scar. Number 5. Bruce Bowen. If Bell was the thorn, Bowen was the shadow. A defensive specialist for the San Antonio Spurs, Bruce Bowen turned pestering into an art form. He was accused often of playing dirty, stepping under jump shots, pulling jerseys, and using every subtle trick to tilt the balance of a duel. For Kobe, who cherished purity in the craft of basketball, Bowen represented everything he despised. Their matchups were not simply physical but psychological. Bowen was relentless, never giving space, never allowing comfort, reducing every possession into a test of will. Kobe, who thrived on control, found in Bowen a disruption, a storm that refused to yield. The hatred here was practical, born of necessity. To conquer the Spurs, Kobe had to endure Bowen. To endure Bowen was to embrace suffering. Years later, when reflecting on his career, Kobe would acknowledge Bowen as one of the fiercest defenders he ever faced. But behind the acknowledgement was a vein of contempt. For though Bowen sharpened his edge, he also carved wounds that never fully healed. At 40, Kobe Bryant did not look back on them with bitterness. He looked back on them with gratitude wrapped in the armor of hatred. For without them, the battles would not have mattered. Without them, the victories would not have glowed so bright. And without them, Kobe would not have become the Black Mamba, the legend who made enemies into fuel and hatred into triumph.